Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to the Bond of Love series. Today we have Rambhoru dasi. She is the director of the International Vaishnava Seminary Professional Chaplain Training Program and the director and founder of Karuna Care Volunteer Chaplain Training Program. Rambhoru Mataji is the first Vaishnavi to be certified clinical pastoral educator, which is considered to be the PhD equivalent of chaplain training. Rambhoru Mataji is the first Vaishnavi to be certified as a professional chaplain. She served as adjunct faculty of the Patient Counseling Department at Virginia Commonwealth University, where she provided clinical pastoral education to chaplains in training. She continues to provide pastoral care education for chaplains serving in different diverse settings such as hospital, hospice, prison, military, gang rehab centers, college campuses, and religious congregations. She is the coordinator of Hearts, a collaborative that focuses on holistic emotional awareness, relationing, training, and support. She's a certified grief recovery specialist and a certified grief support facilitator. She's an international speaker on topics such as bhakti yoga, grief and bereavement, death and dying, self and other empowerment, and community building. She is a certified teacher of the right to use of power and the heart of ethics, and is a passionate advocate for Rupa Goswami's six loving exchanges. Compassionate listening, present as the cure for all personal and social ills. So we had some technical difficulty, and Govinda Priya Mataji is also on, but are you able to hear us now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you so much, Rukmini Priya, for that wonderful introduction. And it is such an honor, Rambhoru Prabhu, to welcome you here and discuss about our dear founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada, and your contribution to the book, Bond of Love, was just so beautiful that I'm sure all of us streaming in or going to hear in the future are really going to benefit from this conversation. So, highlighting what Rukmini Priya has already said about you, it's so impressive that you were one of the first Vaishnavas to take on the service of this clinical pastoral educator, and you still continue to do that. Tell us a little bit about your background, Rambhoru Prabhu.
Oh, that's a long story. That's a long story.
Oh, we have all the time to hear.
Well, background in terms of my, you
Just
know,
a little bit of your upbringing, your
ah,
parents, how did you get introduced to Krishna consciousness? Just a little bit
okay.
about you.
All right. Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in Virginia in the United States and have always been searching for truth. I grew up as a Baptist Christian. My parents were very involved in the church, and I was surrounded by a community that were very close and very much modeled for me what a spiritual community could be. We did. There were family friends of my parents who had children, and we all knew that if they died, I would feel totally at home in their house. So that gave me a deep sense of security when I was a teenager, going through the turmoil of puberty and, high school. I would go to the church for shelter when I got confused or felt hurt or whatever. So the church or the spiritual community became the heart of my direction even before I went to college. And so I chose at a certain point, I'm a musician, so I had to choose between music and religion as a major in college. And I chose religion because as a Sunday school choir leader, I saw my ego becoming so inflated. And I thought, ooh, if music does that to you, you better not go that direction. Now I regret I didn't go to the Shenandoah Music School. I had been accepted there. and I should have done both. But anyway, you can add music later. We found music through kirtan. And as a Baptist, that was very important. Community, spirituality was about community, sharing food, singing, a lot of singing as a spiritual practice. So that has helped me recognize, as I moved on beyond the Baptist church and continued my search, finding or recognizing what Prabhupada was giving us was really true in terms of music as meditation, community, sharing food, as a process of healing us and enlightening us. So,
Wow,
yeah.
that's pretty amazing that you had that sheltered environment of a community that Srila Prabhupada has created for so many of us. So it makes me think that when you already have a spiritual community that you were so connected with, what attracted you to the devotees?
Well, beyond, when I got to college, I chose to go to a Quaker school.
Hmm.
And for those of you, there are different types of Quakers, but they are a group of silent. They're like Christian Buddhists in a way. Their practice is silent meditation on the Lord in the heart, which they call the inner light. So it was impersonal, yet the people themselves in the community, again, very, very major focus on community and fellowship together, sharing food. One of their main focuses was to speak truth in the face of power. And if you know anything about the history of Quakers and Mennonites, they are very much into anti-violence, anti-war, and respecting all people as parts of God. And so I had as a Baptist, our prayer practice was very much external, and when I met the Quakers, I discovered for the first time how to access God within me, through meditation. So their focus was more inward. But I missed the music. They were not, they sang, but Baptists were very much into music. And the ancient Quaker tradition shunned music as being some kind of enjoyment. And I thought, well, but you have to have to have a taste. So, so I had also an experience as a teenager in high school, having boyfriends and listening to the radio. And I remember driving home from school, listening to the radio of love songs, where pretty much all those popular music are a male or female expressing their love of another loved one, female, male, boyfriend, girlfriend. And so I thought, well, these songs, if they were to be sung in glorification, in a loving relationship with Jesus, then they would be hymns. They would be bhajans, as you just change the focus. It's just a wonderful love song. So I began to experiment with that while I was driving the car, and singing these love songs for Jesus, and then I had this kind of a spiritual experience where my eyes got tearful, my hair stood on end, and certainly not anything in comparison to our bhakti experience, but it was like, oh my goodness, that God is present by chanting his name or invoking his name, singing with a prayerful heart. And then I met the Hare Krishnas in college, Quaker school, and they were coming to our school. And I had become a Quaker by that time, kind of initiated as a Quaker or baptized. And but when I met the Hare Krishna people, it was seeing them on the street. I remember in South Carolina, they were huddled together with their book bags. And as a musician, I had resonated with the Bible verse describing materialists as having a sound vibration like tinkling brass and clanking cymbals, like loud and gross. And when I heard the sounds of the Hare Krishna devotees talking together in a huddle, I just passed them by. My sister and I were going shopping. I passed them by and I thought, ooh, their sound vibration is different. There's something different about the way they're talking to each other, softly and with respect. And they kept popping up in my life. One Hare Krishna boy, very new. Obviously, he had a Wrangler T-shirt on, a Wrangler jacket on over his dhoti, and he had, it wasn't a dhoti; it was a ripped bed sheet. He had on a yellow bed sheet, and his tilak was very much crumbled up. It looked like somebody had put a mud spot on his head, and his sika was just like a helicopter, and. But I felt sorry for him. He was sitting in front of our library on campus, and he was trying to, preach or give away his magazines. And I felt sorry for him. As a new Quaker, I thought, oh, this person looks so brainwashed. I should go over and help him. And I tried to engage him, but he was obviously as a new person, thinking women were Maya, and women were, you don't talk to them, and you certainly don't look at them in the eyes. And I had been, as a college student, we had learned if you want to communicate, you have to look someone in the eye. So it was a funny dance between him and me, of him looking at my shoulder or looking at under my neck, and I'm trying to look at him, and then I met him other places, and I realized I finally got a Bhagavad Gita. I did a Bhagavad Gita independent study with a professor on campus, and he had told us to go down to the hippie bookstore and pick out a Bhagavad Gita. And so there were like 10 different versions of Bhagavad Gita on the shelf. And way back in high school, when I was 15 or 16, one of my friends had gone to the temple in Washington, D.C., and came home with that really large Bhagavad Gita with the, red and many, many pictures in it. And they had been told at the temple, this book is so powerful. If you just hold it, you will become enlightened. So when I saw this book Prabhupada's book was on the shelf in the hippie bookshop, I thought, oh, I will get that one, because I know it from my friend. And obviously we hadn't read the Bhagavad Gita, we just held it. We would sit in the car and we would hold it because we thought it's going to make us enlightened, even if you don't read it. So we would hold it, and then we'd pass the book around, we'd hold it, and we never read it. So when I went to college, I had the opportunity to buy Prabhupada's books and start reading it. My professor, however, didn't appreciate the devotional perspective, and he would make fun of me, but I started to read Prabhupada's Gita, but I couldn't figure out how to practice it. It said you should sleep 6 hours. So I'd go.
Where was
What?
Where was it?
I went to Guilford College in North Carolina, in Greensboro, very small Quaker school. And yeah, a very, very lovely mood in that campus, very personal. But yeah, I realized I needed to find the devotees, because
beautiful.
I would go to bed at midnight and try to get up at 6 to try to chant or do something, but I'd fall asleep. It was just the wrong. And then I went to Europe. I went to Europe on a study abroad, and I met the devotees again on the street. So it was just several meetings before I finally joined. Yeah.
That is so beautiful, Rambhoru Prabhu. I just feel like Krishna was setting that stage or that ground for you to really engage in, the way you just mentioned that, you looked at this devotee and you were like, oh, I should go over to try to help him. And that's kind of become your primary service, that inherent, nature or attitude of reaching out to souls to help them. Krishna was just setting the ground for your most important service to the movement. Tell us a little bit about how you actually met Srila Prabhupada and got initiated, and any instruction that he personally gave you.
Well, after I met the devotees on campus and did that independent study, I got a book called Be Here Now, which many devotees, that was their entry into Hare Krishna movement. It was written by a guy named Baba Ram Das, who was the founder of the LSD, the hippie generation. And in that book, it said that a person who's ready to find their guru from within the heart, the guru will come, somehow will lead you. And then I did a study, we called an ecumenical study abroad, where you're studying Christianity without a dogma. The whole Christian movement in that era, they had got how do you say, fed up with fighting dogma, and so they unified a group, unified around the person Jesus, rather than all the different perspectives. Jesus was inspiring them. So I became part of that kind of wave, and went to an ecumenical study in Germany, in Heidelberg, Germany, and met the devotees in Heidelberg. And I had 1,000 questions. I had a list of 100 questions that I needed answered, but and I went to the school, but they couldn't answer them. And then when the Hare Krishna devotees who I met on the street could not speak English, but sent me back to the Heidelberg temple, and I went there, and they were getting ready pretty much right in the beginning. I joined after going for lunch many weeks, few weeks. I joined them, just jumped in, and became a member of the temple. And then Prabhupada came for the first time. I would see him in I guess it was Frankfurt Airport. So everybody from Germany, France, England, Spain, all the European countries came to meet Prabhupada in the airport. And I had only seen him in pictures, and in my mind's eye, the self-realized soul has to have a beard and long hair because Jesus looked like that. And I was like, oh, this is an old man. I was like, he's not so, he's not so what I had in mind. So, but I went, and I was, quite arrogant. I'm still arrogant, but in a different way, academically arrogant. I thought, oh yes, well, I will understand this man when I see him. And so I went to this big crowd of people, but I also was aware when he came in on the red carpet, he was very short. I was surprised how short Prabhupada was. And people lined up on either side of this red carpet. And I was trying to look at him, but I didn't want him to see me, because I thought, well, if he sees me, maybe he will, see how arrogant I am or something. So I was looking at him, and I realized by looking at his demeanor, that he was way beyond my comprehension. I thought as an academic, I would understand him, having been a religion major and stuff, but I saw, oh, this man is way beyond that. And I hid behind a couch. And, in the VIP lounge, they brought him in, they put him on a Vyasasan, and people were screaming and crying and singing. And someone was offering arti, someone was washing his feet, someone was bringing prashadam. It was like the gopis, coming to offer to Krishna. And I was hiding behind a couch because I thought, well, I want to see him, and I want to be up close, but I don't want him to see me. But what I didn't realize is that by hiding behind a couch like this, I was down on my knees. Everybody else was standing above me, and I drew attention to myself, as if you can imagine sitting on Prabhupada's Vyasasan looking out, and you're thinking, oh, there's this really small person there, and behind the VIP couch, and it drew his attention to me rather than blending in. And Prabhupada had this habit of, he would look at everybody in the audience to see who he knew from his travels, older devotees he knew from, matchless gifts, or just see, because some of our American devotees had gone and started temples in Europe. And so, but he kept coming back to me, not recognizing me, but probably, and I'm just speculating, wondering, as I would be wondering, who is this person who is, is this a midget? Is this a person maybe why are they trying to hide? Why are they not showing themselves? They're kind of, and anyway, my first experience with Prabhupada was, every time he would look at me, my heart would crack. I actually heard a visceral crack. And like as you had somebody breaking a branch of a tree, my heart had a sound, and it broke open, and I started to sob, and I just couldn't stop. Many devotees you talked to who saw Prabhupada had this experience of just his gaze was cleansing and heartbreaking, so that you could be real. You would be completely vulnerable and completely
Did he call you over?
No. It was just, I was probably sitting 15 feet from him behind this couch, because they had cleared an area of a horseshoe, and then he there's this couch, I guess, for VIPs or people to talk. We didn't use it. We were just using the room. But I was hiding behind that couch, and he kept looking to me and to others and back to me. Or, that was my perception. And every time he looked at me, it just, softened, broke my heart until I was pretty much on my knees, metaphorically, spiritually on my knees. And he really took away my pride. He humiliated me in a way that I became aware of this person. I cannot penetrate. I can't understand, but he sees me, but I can't see him.
How old were you, Rambhoru Prabhu?
I was probably 20 by that time, about 20. I had met the devotees when I was, 16 was my journey, seeing them on television, and, finally first time actually seeing him. And I'd been with the devotees a month or two before that. So I was very new, hadn't read the
And you
book.
got initiated?
I got initiated and about 6 months later, April. Yeah. I guess. Yeah, it was in 1974.
In Frankfurt?
No, Frankfurt was where I started, but they moved. The temple I joined first was Heidelberg, a very small house, and there were hundreds of devotees crammed in that house. Sleeping on, staircases and in hallways. It was very small. And but right when I joined, they were getting ready to move to the Schloss, the castle, Rettershof, which is in a little village outside of Frankfurt. So I moved with them, and that's where we entertained Prabhupada for the first time. He came after he was at the airport. He came to the Schloss, and I got to cook for him a couple of times and sit in darshan with him a few times. But the movement, by the time I had joined, had grown so much already that you had to have had some history with Prabhupada or some special GBC task to really get super close. So I was doing menial service, kitchen work, morning walks. So it wasn't like one of the early devotees.
So how did this, desire to become a chaplain, how did that come about? How did you take on that service? Was it an instruction? Was it a calling? Was it something that, because to me, it just seems like that's what you were meant to do, for.
Yeah, it was a long journey. I had been in the movement about 30 years by the time I went back to school. And I had lived in Vrindavan for about 10 years, 8 years, and then I moved to Mayapur, worked in the Gurukul. And the Prabhupada left the planet in 1977. The way I understand it now as a grief specialist and a person who understands human behavior a little bit, is the movement was going through an enormous amount of grief in the loss of Srila Prabhupada, unawares that they were doing, but this was going on. And in our efforts to try and keep the movement going, I think that a lot of us in those days, at least our, male leadership, had this notion that they had to carry the burden of following in Prabhupada's shoes to live up to Prabhupada's standard. So I feel like as immature devotees, we tried to imitate Prabhupada rather than just follow his order. And sadly, we were losing it. The time I decided to go back to school, we were losing a lot of our leadership, and sannyasis and gurus. They were not able to manage it, and I think part of it was we did not know how to grieve, that we had to pause. We were told when the night Prabhupada left his body, I was in Germany, and we were told it's business, not a business as usual, business more than usual. And we were all sent out on the street, which was a wonderful thing to solace ourselves in separation of Prabhupada. But now I know that we need to pause and really do that mourning that we saw when Prithu Maharaj died. His wife gave time, when Pandu died, Kunti and the children, they were on the floor crying, and we have to do that process. Otherwise it interferes with the rest of our growth process. So we didn't do that. And by the time, I guess it was 1999, that was almost 20 years after Prabhupada left, 1977. The movement had gone through many changes, and some good, not so good. And I was in Mayapur and decided when I had to go, back, my visa renewed in America. I decided to stay. And I had been in college for 2 years already before I had left United States. And my father, I had a son at that time. I had two sons. One had already left for Los Angeles and established himself there when he was 18. And then I had a 10-year-old who was with me, and he needed school, and he'd never been to a Western school. And so I called up Irmela. She was living and she lived 45 minutes from the school I had left. And she kindly took my son in as a boarder for 2 years. And then I went to school 45 minutes away at Guilford College. And I would come back and pick my son up at Irmela's on the weekend and bring him to the college, and I was staying in the home of a family that I had 30 years before had been a student, and they were my professors. And when I left for Heidelberg, they had had a baby. And now he was a grown man of 25, 26 years old. And he had become a Rastafarian vegetarian. and I needed a job. And I had no marketable skills because I had been in the movement for 30 years. You can't market yourself because you know how to make samosas and you know how to make arti and puja. And I had in India, I had written a cookbook, that I had developed in Ireland. And it was called A Food for Peace. You can still find it places. They still sell it in India at the Bihari Lal's bookshop. And that was my credential. He had been working at a vegan restaurant, and I brought my cookbook in and said, "Look, can you engage me somehow?" And so she made me the pot washer first. I started washing pots and dishes. And then I showed her my cookbook, and she said, "Okay, why don't you cook some stuff?" I started to become a cook in that restaurant. And then I went back to school. I went, first I met my professors who I hadn't seen in 35 years. Now they were old people. We hardly recognized each other. My credits had run out. When you go to school after 30 years, they're kind of redundant. But out of care for me, they went to the administration and they got them all activated. So I didn't have to make up those 2 years, and I was able to graduate with my degree in religion and women's studies. And then they advised me to go to seminary in Los Angeles. My son had Mahdi. I don't know, some of you may know Mahdi, Bhakti Without Borders and Mantra Americana. So he called me up and he said, "Mom, why don't you move over to Los Angeles, and we'll make the family we never had. We never lived together as a family because he went to school at 5. And in those old days, I lived in the temple and in a little room next to the Brahmacharini ashram, shared the bathroom with the Brahmacharinis, and my husband lived in his office. So my husband and I have never lived together, ever. We've never had a home together.
The old days, as we say it.
Good old days, yeah. There were some good things about it, but there was a lot of things I would do differently now, Yeah.
So you taking on that service, is that an instruction from Srila Prabhupada directly or indirectly through your god brothers, god sisters?
Yeah, thank you for helping me focus. It's such a long story. When I was living in Vrindavan, I had a dream. My husband and I, we established a place called Prabhupada Vani Ashram, which is on the corner as you go around. Now it's a brahmachari ashram, I believe. But I had a dream. In that ashram, we had made 2 underground apartments because it gets so hot, and it was like air conditioning if you go underground. And in the dream, Prabhupada was in one of those rooms. And he was staying with us in the ashram, so I took a prasadam to him. And as I was bowing down, took the prasadam plate and bowing down upon entering his room in the dream, he looks at me and he says, can you ask your husband if he will let you take care of my personal body? Then he waved to the forms of Sri Sri Lord Chaitanya Gornitai, and he said, without the mercy of Lord Nityananda, you will not have the mercy of Krishna. And then I woke up and I was very puzzled because I know there's certain types of dreams. Some dreams are just, golden mountain, but then there are dreams that, you really do get a darshan of spiritual master. And for me, that I took to heart and I did an investigation on what does this mean? And of course, we know Prabhupada says that ISKCON is his body. And he tells the story about how there were two sons and they were massaging the body of the father. And in their pride and their anger, they got in an argument. And as they massaged them, they killed the father in the process. So, during that time in the 90s and that era, we were starting to really struggle as a movement. How are we trying to figure it out? How do we engage in the absence of Prabhupada? And so this dream became for me an instruction that I wasn't quite sure about in that moment. Another devotee had a dream. I don't know if you know Karta, Veerbahu's wife, who lived in Vrindavan. I think she's there a lot now. But she had a dream about me while I was in Vrindavan. She said, I have to tell you this dream. I had Prabhupada pointed to you and said, you should start now teaching Bhagavad Gita. And in Vrindavan, no women were giving classes. So I thought, yeah, that's just a dream. So I just disregarded that until I got to the United States and things started to unfold, in terms of going back to school. And I became involved and interested in interfaith and a dialogue. I had finally done 3 years of seminary work, studied Christianity, but they allowed me to use my Bhagavad Gita as my text and use the curriculum. But there was a moment where my pastoral care, which is the kind of Christian word for compassionate listening care, a professor had us write down on a piece of paper, what is the scariest population that you think in your future you will have to minister to? And we had to write it on a piece of paper. She didn't tell us what we were going to do with that. And I wrote down on that paper, the most scary, intimidating population would be children who were victims of burns, really burned children, wounded children. So then she said, whatever you wrote on that paper, after she had them come into her, she had all our papers in her hand. She said, now you have to go to that place, to that population, and sit down and meditate on what in your religion can you offer to offer them comfort. What would you say to these children if you had the opportunity that would give them comfort? And I sat there, and the first thing comes to mind, to protect myself, because my heart was breaking to see these children being wheeled in, 50 children. They were on wheelchairs. Some of them were amputated, disfigured, terribly wounded. And I thought, I know now what I was doing in my heartbreak. I was grieving so much to see them that I went to my head. I thought, well, they must have done something to deserve it. So I went to karma theory. And as I thought about it, I thought, well, that would be called victim blaming. You're blaming the kids for this terrible experience. That's a horrible, that doesn't feel very compassionate. That doesn't feel like love to me. There was a disconnect in my philosophy. Why would you tell kids that? That would not be helpful. So I wrote a paper. I still didn't have the answers, but then I had a family crisis, after I graduated. I'd gone to PhD study for a year at Claremont Graduate School, studied philosophy of religion. I was very tired after 6 years studying dry, all that, it's like, after 30 years of bhakti, where it's all about the heart. Academia can be really in your head. And I took a break. I said, I got to have a break. I'd just finished studying Sanskrit and just like, So I enrolled in something called Clinical Pastoral Education in the Mexican border in Yuma, Arizona. It's the hottest part of the United States, where California, Arizona, and Mexico kind of come together, And I usually you have to take an internship before you do it, but they accepted me like right out, and I was assigned to go to the emergency room and bed to bed with people dying of cancer and amputations and uh, I mean, it was just a whole shock for me because for 30 years I'd been isolated and insulated from suffering. As much as for us in the Hare Krishna movement, suffering was like, oh, being sleepy during Mangalarti, getting up in the morning and taking a cold shower. It's like, oh, that's so much suffering fasting on Janmashtami. And, it was a really kind of ridiculous when you look at the suffering of the world now, looking at how naive and immature that was. And of course, my bhakti suffered from that because I hadn't really understood or seen the suffering that's right among us all the time. And I cried that whole year. I mean, it was just a trail of tears to realize that God, Rambhoru, after 30 years of practicing Krishna consciousness, you still don't get it, that this is the mission of mercy and we're here to relieve human suffering. And so I was bedside with people, who were at their last moments and their families. And what do you say? What do you do? And I realized what they need to hear, whether they're Hare Krishna people or not, they need to hear that you are loved unconditionally, that whatever you've done, whatever mistakes you've made, you are so much more than that. And people need to hear that. And so I decided after that year to go on and become a teacher, educator of chaplains, because my educator in Yuma, he was a horse whisperer, if you know what that is. He was somebody who trained horses without whips. He was a very charismatic, mystical kind of guy from Texas. And there was just something about him. I thought, I want to know what he knows on the side of an educator. It's one thing to be a student, but there was something he was doing that I couldn't comprehend. It wasn't pedagogy like we study in the West, that the teacher just tells you what you should believe, opens your skull, puts in the knowledge, and you memorize it and you regurgitate it. It wasn't like that. It was a journey of forcing us to look inside our own hearts and discover the super soul or the supreme being inside of ourselves. So he was the person who introduced me to healing touch. I became an energy healer and a harpist. I started to play the harp and go bedside with a harp. I have a little harp that I take bed to bed and I park it outside. And when words are not enough, like in the moment of death, and someone is like babies can't sleep, I would put babies to sleep with my harp, or someone in those neck braces who are in the neuroscience, they've broken their neck and they can't lay down, and I would play the harp and they'd fall asleep. So I learned a lot of things about healing. I became a aromatherapy kind of person and Ayurveda, and just studying how do we heal human hearts. And then I went on to be an educator in Richmond, Virginia for 3 years. And then my son and my daughter-in-law got pregnant with my first grandchild. And I thought, ooh, they were in California. And I thought, oh, I can't miss that. And so I found a priest in downtown East Los Angeles who was looking for someone like me. And he hired me. And he's a vegetarian and he has kirtan on his cell phone. And he's been to jail, 30 odd times protesting war. Super humble, compassionate man. And I'm still working with him in Los Angeles part-time. I Zoom in from Melbourne, Australia, and I teach professional chaplains in Los Angeles. Not just they're Christian priests, there's pastors, there's imams, Buddhist, people from all religions who are in the clergy leadership position. So I still do that.
How was the birth of Karuna Care? And do you see that with your service to Srila Prabhupada?
Yeah. Well, what happened to me was I realized I was getting old. I'm 70 now. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I thought, I was taking care of my 95-year-old mom. And I thought, Prabhupada, if you don't use what you've learned, Prabhupada says you become envious. It rots in your heart. And I thought, how am I going to do that? I haven't begun to do anything, how do you bring what you've learned in a professional setting into the Hare Krishna movement? So many devotees do not have higher degrees, they haven't studied much, they very much depending on Krishna's mercy, so why should we do anything but chant Hare Krishna? And but people were asking me, Rambhour, why are you not teaching the devotees? You're teaching Muslims and Christians and Jewish rabbis. Why are you for 20 years now working with these people, and there's not a Hindu on the horizon? We don't have our own program, and we don't have our voice in the mix, this interfaith mix. So I started to think about it, and I became really convinced that before I die, I need to share what I've learned, somehow. And then I started to talk to different gurus. I talked to Giriraj Swami. I talked to Vaisheshika. I talked to Ramapat, different people who, if you go to my website, you can see they've endorsed Karuna Care. And Vaisheshika said to me, because I knew I need to write. I need to write. I didn't tell you, I had three instructions before that from Prabhupada that I take also as my instruction. I had working 80 hours a week, being the manager or the director of this chaplain program in Los Angeles. And I hurt myself. I was in an accident with my granddaughter in the ocean, twisted my back, and I then was in a wheelchair for about 2 months because I couldn't walk. And I couldn't sleep either. It was so painful. So I was laying on the bed. And I know from the hospital, this is something every chaplain knows, and doctors also are aware of, is that often a person who comes to the hospital, it's not about a physical ailment. It's the result of some spiritual wounding inside. So now I had to apply that to myself. I thought, okay, Rambhour, here you are. You're incapacitated. You have to crawl on your hands and knees to the toilet, and you can't sleep at night. So how did I bring myself here, and what is Krishna trying to teach me? What is the meaning in all of that? So I laid there for 3-4 days without sleeping, asking this question of Prabhupada. You had to get me on my knees to pay attention to something I'm not paying attention to. What are you trying? What is it? And it's just like thrashing about. Couldn't find any comfortable way I could even rest because pain medicine didn't fix it. So I had to be alert, I had to be awake and pay attention and ask this question. And out of the deep, and I heard it like you're talking to me now, and I'm sure it came from Super Soul. I think this is how Krishna communicates. Sometimes, like we have Krishna communicating to Kamsa in the clouds, that you need to do, Rambhour, you need to do two things. You need to change course here. And I do think our subconscious or the Supreme Self communicates when we are like suicidal ideations. That is our deepest self telling us, you need to not die, but something in you needs to die if you're going to, stay balanced and healthy. So the 3 instructions were, you need to start teaching Bhagavad Gita, the same instruction I'd gotten from Karta years ago in Vrindavan that I thought, I just laughed it off. The women don't do that. And the second one was, you need to play kirtan with your harp on the Tuesday night kirtan that you have in the Los Angeles temple. So I immediately called up the temple guy who organizes the Gita class, started doing that in the evening, and took my harp across the street, from the temple, and started singing with my harp. And the third instruction was, you need to write. And so if you've ever tried to write a book, it's not an easy thing. It's the hardest thing ever. So I asked Vaiseshika, what? I feel like I need to write. That would be the easiest thing rather than doing anything. You just put it in a book. But he said, if you want to get your head organized, if you want to get your thoughts organized, you have to teach what you want to write about. So then I thought, okay, so now I have to start something. And it took me 3 months after I talked to him, and Giriraj kept saying, every time he would come to Washington Temple, I would say, you really think I should start this thing, this chaplain training program? Yep, do it. Yeah, why not? I called him. I had many conversations, and I was so, I didn't know how. I didn't know how to start. I was living in the basement of my 95-year-old mom. I had, I wasn't even attached to the temple. I went to Washington, D.C. for a while. But then you had COVID, right? Yeah. So on Janmashtami of 2019, I sat down and like, okay, you're going to start. And I started mapping out on my computer a vision, what would I need to do to start? But I hadn't talked to anybody about it.
Mm.
I would go every weekend to Washington Temple, and I would sit in the temple packing cookies with another lady, and her husband would give class. There was nobody else in the come to class. It was just two of us and him giving class. And one day when I went out to the shoe room to get my shoes to leave, the wife of this person, Ananda Rupa, she followed me out and she said, Mataji, I'd really like to assist you in your service. And I'm thinking, well, what service are you talking about? I'm just taking care of my 95-year-old mom at her home. It's not like I'm doing anything. And she goes, well, whatever you're doing, I'd like to assist you. And I said, okay, well, what can you do? What skills have you got? I said, I don't know. She said, what do you need? I said, well, first of all, I need somebody to make a website. I don't know how to do that. And so she said, well, I don't know, but my husband knows. So she recruited her husband, and he made a pretty rudimentary website. But the temple president looked at it, who has her hands more on the youth. She said, you need to make something a little more jazzy than that. That's not going to fly. And then I went to bed depressed. I thought, oh God, I don't know how to do this. And one of my friends found Indrajumna Swami's person who manages his website and advertising. She said, I have 2 weeks. I can give you 2 weeks for free, to work on this. And she put that website up in 2 weeks, from Vrindavan. So we just started. And I encourage anybody listening to this, if you feel that Krishna wants you to do something, don't wait. Walk in that direction and everything will come. Ideas, just all the time, observe, listen. Krishna will guide you.
That's amazing. That's such a wonderful. It almost seems like you found your calling, even if it was a little late in your life. Has been a preparation of that. What advice would you give anyone that's listening to us, and especially the Vaishnavis? Um, how can they feel connected to Srila Prabhupada? You know, for someone like me who was born after Srila Prabhupada left this planet, his appearance and disappearance happened simultaneously. So, when we just celebrated Srila Prabhupada's appearance day, and I've always thought, and I always remember this, that his appearance and disappearance in my life was almost simultaneous, because his physical presence, of course, it's through devotees like you, Prabhupada's disciples, all those wonderful nectar that we have in the books, his Bhaktivedanta purports, but his personality, the little things, how he opened the door for this lady, how he did this, how, when we hear all this from his disciples, it just completes the person that, whose mind and whose intelligence and whose devotion we see in the Bhaktivedanta purports. And that just creates another dimension for us. So what advice, like you already said, just keep following your direction, but tell us something of how we can stay connected to Srila Prabhupada.
Well, you just remember, I didn't have a lot of association with Prabhupada either. My connection to Prabhupada was through my husband. He was a temple president in GBC and so on. And so I was always, depending on him and working through my immediate authority. But I read profusely Srila Prabhupada's books. And I got to know him through his books mainly, And when we were in Ireland, we had no Prabhupada disciples but us. That was just my husband and I. So it was nobody. Just like now, you may not have his physical presence, doesn't matter. First of all, you should know that everybody who's initiated in the ISKCON movement is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. We're all his students. I don't care who's been initiated by Diksha. Prabhupada is our Shiksha Guru. And he's available, he's accessible, not just through his books, but he's a Shaktivesha avatar. That makes him different than all others. And I grew up a Christian, so I know Prabhupada had said also that Jesus was a Shaktivesha avatar. I never met Jesus either, but I used to pray to him. And so we know that in order to serve Krishna, you have to go through that via media. So I would encourage anybody who, I don't care who you're initiated by, to approach Srila Prabhupada. Pray to him. that's the quickest results I've ever gotten in terms of responses. If you have your back against the wall and you don't know even what he wants you to do, pray about it. Krishna, guide me, Prabhupada, guide me. And the two prayers I have always found really powerful and useful is help me. These 4-letter word, help me. And we all have these experiences. We just, we're in a jam. We've made a boo-boo. We don't know what to do. We don't get. You have to pray for help because Krishna's waiting. He's in your heart. He's right there. And if you read the books with the awareness that what Prabhupada's pointing to us is, he's trying to get us to have a relationship with the Lord in our heart. The external representation of the Lord in our heart is who we take initiation from. And that's how we can say the Guru is one. So the big mistake some people make is that we're worshiping the body of a Guru, but they're transparent via media that links us up to Krishna himself. So with that attitude and with the entry, the portal that we go, it has to go from within us. To pray for guidance, help me. I don't know what to do. And in fact, it is such a powerful process in the hospital where I cannot proselytize because it's, a public place. You can't not go in with your Bhagavad Gitas and to preach, but I can introduce people who are helpless to that the world is a beneficent place. There's something out there. You can call it God. You can call it Allah. You can call it Jehovah. If you pray for help, everything changes. It's a magic. It's an open secret. It's such a simple thing. If with all our hearts we cry for help to that being we call Krishna, that absolute personality, your life will change. And just be aware that God is a person. To that degree you reach out, to that degree he will reach back. It's that simple. I learned that as a Christian as well, but even more so in the person of Srila Prabhupada. Like Jesus, he's here. He's aware. He's right there to respond, and he's accessible to everyone. You don't have to be initiated by him directly to have that experience.
Oh, that's beautiful. So yeah, praying to Srila Prabhupada has definitely to give us some direction of how we can use whatever talents and skill set Krishna has provided us with in his service,
Right.
and that way be connected to
Yes.
the movement, um, to the whole process of bhakti.
Yeah.
Rambhoru Prabhu, just speaking with you, it just tells me how much of an inward journey you've had alongside with an outward journey of moving so many places, living in temples, going back to school. It's not been easy, and it's not been uh, a cakewalk. Let me put it that way. But tell us something about developing and having the strength to take this inward journey. Tell us how you did it, and tell us how we can all support each other in this inward journey of actually not just making it about externals, about just the details of Krishna consciousness, of just being in the temple and being present, but also really, really deeply connecting with Guru and Krishna within our hearts.
Well, yeah, it's a kind of in stages. Krishna reveals certain things. Well, what I've had to do is through my studies, learning behavioral, why people do what they do, has helped me see that we need to first of all get to know ourselves. First, we have to become human before we can think in terms of become transcendental. I think our biggest mistake is that we tried to jump from 0 to 100, and people can't survive like that. You first of all have to know the self. We can't know the self without knowing the super self also. So it's a journey like that. But we start by figuring out what gives us joy. Because the heart, who we are as Satchidananda, is eternal beings of wisdom and joy. This word joy is another word for bliss, but it translates better in English for me. So you have to find out look at your life. Everybody look at your life. Go within and see what gives me joy. What could I do without payment? What would I do just naturally? Is it cooking? Do you love to study? Do you love to paint? What is it that you love? Start there. And then you look at what the mission and message of Prabhupada is and the Parampara, and you say, how can I do what I love to do and also do it in a way that will benefit human society? And by benefit, it means relieving human society. I have an exercise I do with people where you take a piece of paper and you divide it into 4 parts. First, you write a list of all the things that you love to do, things that give you joy. Secondly, list what do you do well. Sometimes you love to do something, but you don't do it well, like singing. Some people like to sing. They don't sing very well, right? The third column, you put down, what does the world need? What do you think the world needs? And the fourth column is, what do you think the world will pay you for? Even if you might not do it for pay, people are looking for jobs that resonate with who they are. Otherwise, it's miserable, you know? So you have to draw a line. If there's something all the way across that gives you joy, that you do well, that the world needs and it will pay you for, that's probably your life mission. You know, don't try to imitate others. You've got to find what is yours to do. So I don't think, we have, if you look at Prabhupada's books and his mission, he gave us a huge picture. It's unlimited. And you need to find, or all of us need to find, where we fit. You can't do it all. But he was short of time, so he had to sprinkle out, well, if you're into that, do that. All of that is wide open. Find something to engage in that you do well, that you love to do, that the world needs, and get going, find that thing. And if you don't know in the beginning, you try certain things out. By trying it, you can then course correct, just like a GPS. The universe or Krishna will give you feedback, what to do, what not to do. There were many things that we've had to adjust with Karuna Care. Every student I'm listening to, okay, glitches, problems, suggestions. I'm following them. And so if you have an attitude, and this is an instruction to everyone, we have to come at our goals as servants. And if you want to grow something, you have to think of yourself as the servant, not, okay, I'm the leader of it, now you need to conform to my. No, it's a co-creation. We're creating this Karuna Care as we speak. And now at 4 years out, it's international. We're in China, we're in Russia, we're in South America, and Krishna's sending like-minded people. So you need to find what you love and then find your people. Not everybody's into cow protection. Theoretically, but you're not maybe doing cows. Not everybody's doing deity worship. Not everybody's cooking. Find what you love and then find your people. And so you now have a community inside of the world community, because we need community in order to survive in this movement. So find your people.
Fantastic. I'm going to do that exercise myself right as we get off. But, we're coming to the end of this conversation, which really went by so fast. But I wanted to talk to you about, tell us a little bit about the Hearts. That has just been the new initiative. What does it stand for? How can anybody help and support? Anything that you would like to.
Well, we were. I don't know if you were part of the summit that happened a couple of years ago. And in North America, they made this summit, and anybody who wanted to come and reimagine ISKCON, and so I didn't put it out there. My friend Sukavaha, she said, okay, Karuna Care, let's put that on the map. And then we formed a committee of about 6 or 7 of us. Mahatma's there, and Rukmini's part of that. Yeah, Brajalila, Ikavira. And we decided what the movement needs more than anything is education around holistic emotional awareness, relational training, and support. That's what we're really needing now. We have a lot of devotees who come to the Hare Krishna movement because they have broken lives. Most of us have trauma in our background. Most of us have some kind of dysfunction, and we're looking towards the family of Krishna as a corrective to our dysfunction and our pain. but we don't have the tools, the skills, the people here to receive them. How do you, help? Healing is a part of the process of chanting Hare Krishna, and the devotional process is the remedy. But how do you actually apply that in a way that really does bring healing? So Hearts, it was a monthly presentation that one of our Hearts members would provide based on various topics like self-care or grief or even addiction, different ones of us who have various specialties. But now we're probably going to, in the future, change our website to karunahearts.org. It's easier. And the Hearts, now we're on Kajabi platform, which is a really professional platform for teaching. We're going to focus on that, and Hearts will become kind of integral to Karuna Care. We do have a tab on the website, so we can put recorded programs. We've already done their presentations, but that may change also. We're kind of going through reconstruction, but it's really, this is what we do. Our whole focus is helping devotees learn interpersonal skills and get to know themselves, discover themselves, and heal themselves through becoming aware of grief, what it is. We all carry loss because there's change. Change is part of life. Many of us get stuck in the past, and because we haven't done that healing journey to catch us up so that we can move on. And so we the Hearts is part of that. How do we repair relationships when they're broken? How do we take responsibility for our behavior and our thoughts? How do we understand our losses, our trauma? That's a big one. Many devotees, 1 in 4 women who come to the Hare Krishna movement have sexual trauma, childhood abuse in their background. So we're trying to, create platforms, listening circles, courses, book studies for us to get to know how to heal ourselves as we become agents of healing for others. Because you can't help others until you first help yourself.
Fill your own cup.
Yep, you got to do the work.
Thank you so much, Rambhoru Prabhu, not only for this conversation today, but for everything that you are doing, have done, and continue to do. It's been such an honor, to have this conversation and to hear from you, to just get a little insight of your life, your dedication, your inward and outward journey. Um, so thank you so much. And thank you very much to all our viewers for being here, for supporting the show, Bond of Love. It's Bond of Love is so beautiful, just like the name suggests. It's really the bond of love between not just Srila Prabhupada and his immediate disciples, but it's to connect us, all of us, to Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
Through your journey, I feel so much more connected to, and my faith and my determination to do whatever I can for this wonderful body of Srila Prabhupada, like you mentioned. And if you see, we're flashing on the screen where you can purchase this book from, The Bond of Love, which is beautiful, beautiful reflections and meditations and sharings by different Vaishnavis. Please get a copy of that. Also, go visit Karuna Care. We've posted the link a couple times. It's again flashing on our screen. And I want to take this moment to also thank Rukmini Priya, who has taken on the responsibility of, heading the show and organizing and arranging. So thank you so much, Rukmini Priya. You can also join us up here. Thank you. So thank you so much, Rambhoru Prabhu. And thank you so much to all of viewers. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Right.